Hi, welcome to the Day Palmer Show. And with me this episode, I have the author of Can You Hear Me? She's a speaker, former maths teacher for BCPS, founder of a non-profit organization. And in this episode, she's going to talk about why the public education system is failing our children and what to do about it. Suzanne DeMallie, welcome to the Day Palmer Show.
Thank you, Dave. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here as well. Well, it's hot topic really, because obviously what's happened in the past year as well. You know, I mean, I'm homeschooling my daughter, but preferably, I mean, she's at a private school, but preferably I'd like to have her just going to school, and so it's homeschooling mainly. So we can talk a bit about that as well. But of course, you've mainly been an outspoken person, an activist, really. With this, and it wasn't your background first. Obviously, you're teaching. It wasn't your background at first. I think you was an accountant or something, was you? Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I was a CPA.
Yeah. So tell us the story, and then also tell us, how is the public education system failing our children?
Sure. Well, do you want to know how I got into education?
Yeah, tell us from the beginning how it all happened, and then go into how it's failing us.
Sure, you're right. Well, I graduated college with a business degree, so you're right. I did start off actually in the finance world as a CPA. And I got into education really because of my children. I have 3 kids, and my middle son, Christopher, when he was in kindergarten, he was diagnosed with something called an auditory processing disorder, for your listeners, that just means that their ears work just like everyone else's. They capture the auditory signals, but their brain has difficulty interpreting the sounds that are coming in. It affected his speech and his ability to learn to read, because the basics of reading is phonics and being able to discriminate between similar sounds. And so as a mom, I just started, doing a lot of research to try to understand his problem and to be able to help him with his education. And I just uncovered this wealth of information about how all kids have difficulty hearing in a typical classroom, even those with perfectly normal hearing, because the acoustics in classrooms are so poor. And young children do not have fully developed neurological capabilities to be able to process what they're hearing the same as an adult can. And so they actually need an even better acoustic environment than someone with normal hearing, or an adult would need. So I became a real strong advocate for trying to educate the educators about these important auditory issues in the classroom. And I discovered a technology that just solved all the problems. It was just simply giving a teacher a wireless microphone and putting 1 or more speakers in the classroom to distribute their voice around the room. So it didn't matter if a kid's sitting in the back row or the front row, they would hear the teacher the same. So that's kind of what jump-started my activism, as you call it, and kind of getting into the education arena. And, that was my first experience really starting to see those problems in education that you're getting into. The bureaucracy just impeded progress. There's so many layers of bureaucracy that you have to go through to get change made. And the change that I was advocating for was all research based and, had been even implemented in other districts. It was a proven technology. It wasn't that expensive to put into the rooms. And I just saw how difficult it was for, the average person without any connections to really have change made. So I started, really lobbying for this in my local school district. And then I continued to do that and bring it up to a national level as well. And fortunately, I had joined forces with the national PTA in the United States. And so that gave me the backing of 6 million members. And we were able to, get the systems, the technology put in the classrooms in many states and districts throughout the country. But it was a long, tedious process. And it just shouldn't be that way. So just kind of, that was what led me into the world of education. And I was so passionate about every child having an equal opportunity for education that I ended up going back to school and becoming a teacher myself.
Okay.
And then I worked in the Baltimore County system for 7 years. And that's when I really just saw a whole nother side of problems with education.
Yeah, because you're right inside the organization. So
yes.
you get involved. Yeah. Did you get involved with trade unions as well on that? I mean, sometimes they can help, but sometimes they can be a bit of a hindrance.
You know, I was a member of a union, but you know, I didn't really see
it helping,
I guess, a lot of benefit from it.
Right. I see, yeah.
And my book really focuses not on unions at all, but really the problems that I saw within the classroom as a teacher.
Right. I'm with you now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, your son, I mean, is that class as being learning disabled, or it's just a different way of learning?
It was, yeah, I mean, it definitely impacted his learning ability.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it did impact him initially, but, you know, he's doing very well right now. He's actually in college, about to graduate.
Oh, right.
So,
okay, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to study a politics degree actually when I was about 40 years old. 36 actually, but I got it. Well, I was still working as a firefighter. Then I found out I got diagnosed with dyslexia. So that actually made me think about some stuff that happened at school and how it could have been addressed. But you know, that's you know, couple of generations back to your son.
Right.
So you know, you think now up to date in the 21st century, they would have come on top of these things, wouldn't you?
You would. And again, it's just you know, talking about the problems in education. You know, a lot of the, at least here in the US, a lot of the policies and practices that are being used in the schools are decided by people who've never been in a classroom before.
Oh.
You know, it's the people at the top layers. And so they come up with, I think overall they have great intentions, you know, that are behind those policies.
Yeah.
But they just don't know the reality all the time of what is going on in the classroom, what the teacher is struggling to deal with. And sometimes those policies are sort of a one size fits all.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily work.
No.
You know, we have very diverse student populations here. You know, and so we have different levels of community support depending on where the school is located. So sometimes that great idea just in practice and reality isn't always such a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see you was looking at going as far as microphones and stuff like that to make the sound better. Tell us about that side. How did you get involved in that, and how does that help?
Well, it helps because you know, again, kids with normal hearing can actually miss out on up to 1/3 of what their teacher says in the classroom.
Right, yeah.
Because the acoustics are so poor in classrooms.
Right.
And kids just do not have fully developed hearing abilities, neurological hearing abilities, until they are in their teenage years.
Yeah.
And so I'll give you an example. What that means is, you know, if you're an adult, if you're in a classroom with, you know, a 6-year-old child, and there's that typical background noise going on, you know, if the teacher says something and in that sentence there's the word wetter or weather, you can hear that difference as an adult. You can distinguish between that fine difference. But a child might not be able to distinguish it because of some background noise going on and things in the room. And, you know, even if you didn't quite hear the word as an adult, you would be able to figure out probably what the teacher had said just because of the context of the sentence. A child just doesn't have that language database to do that. And certainly kids that are English language learners, or, you know, they don't have the native language experience, they have greater difficulty. So for that reason, you know, it's just really hard for kids to understand in the classroom. And almost 15% of children actually have a permanent hearing impairment.
Yeah.
That's a pretty large number. And another 10 to 15% of children have a temporary hearing impairment on any given day of the week because
of hearing. That's a quarter of the population of school kids.
Yes, it's a lot. So if you just give a teacher a wireless microphone, and you know, a good quality one, It amplifies their voice just a little bit, but the more important thing is if you put some speakers in the room, it just distributes their voice evenly around the room. And I used one as a teacher myself, and it makes an amazing difference because you don't have to try to yell and scream to get your voice to the back of the room. You know, you get to have a more calming, soothing tone.
Yeah.
It also just ends up kind of changing the climate of the room because kids it's a more calm, relaxed atmosphere as opposed to this teacher who's kind of yelling to get their voice heard throughout the room.
Yeah.
It's very cost effective because it saves on teachers having to be out because of vocal fatigue, because teachers talk a lot during the day. And if they are trying to raise their voice all day long to reach the kids in the back row, it strains their vocal cords and they're probably going to get laryngitis and things like that and have to be out. And then schools pay for, substitutes and all. So there are cost savings as well from putting the technology in the room. And there's so much research that's been done that supports that if we use this technology, it will increase academic achievement for all kids in the room and literacy and behavior improvements and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this can be actually a good point for a model for schools around the world, really, because that isn't something even around the world where they have these auditory aids, if you like, or microphones. I don't know what you call it.
Exactly. So this is not an issue that's unique to one classroom or one country or one state. You're right. This is a universal need.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on to your book in a minute. But obviously, the past year, the education system got disrupted even more, obviously, for obvious reasons.
Sure.
I mean, I'm still homeschooling my daughter because I'm working from home, but for an Australian company in the Philippines, in their office in the Philippines, but I'm from the UK. So I was going back and forth from the UK before the lockdown. So she's been homeschooled because kids haven't been allowed to attend school. So it's either tutoring and homeschooling. So she's at a private school, but obviously it's nice to be, going to school with the other kids and things like that. Right. What do you think, how's that disruption affected the work you're doing with your campaign?
Yeah. Well, I really, at this current time, I've been more focused on education issues, like a whole bunch of education issues. I'm not focused anymore just on the microphones and the hearing related issues. What I've found is that COVID didn't create additional problems in education. It just magnified them. I think a lot of the problems were just already there and they have just become sort of magnified and brought to people's attention because of COVID.
Right.
I mean, I hear what we've seen and our schools, and I'm in the state of Maryland, and our schools just started returning to hybrid instruction around March and April of this year.
Okay, right. So before it was strictly learning from home, online?
Online, right, online. And one of the things that I talk about, one of the problems I talk about in my book is technology. And what I talk about in the book is that, I think technology is great for the older kids, for them to have one-to-one devices. I think it's necessary. But when I was teaching, we had one-to-one devices for elementary aged kids. And I think there's some downside to that. I think kids are probably using technology too much sometimes and putting them in front, giving them additional screen time in a school. Can be problematic. It's not always the best way to teach young kids because they miss out on that collaboration and socialization that they get with other kids.
That's the thing.
And that's what COVID has actually, I think, kind of brought to a lot of people's attention. When kids had to learn online, I think we really saw the downside of that they're missing out on that face-to-face instruction and collaboration. So,
And they have
So
to
I
go
think
and
if
do
any,
some things in teams, or do something as a group, you know, like
yeah,
obviously
yeah,
sports and
absolutely.
maybe
That's so
other
important.
drama or something like that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because young kids, that's where they're learning how to share and work with
Yeah.
other
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
And
that's it.
so they miss out on that with technology. So I think if anything, like COVID certainly just sort of highlighted some of my concerns and, validated some of them. And then we had a lot of equity issues as well, because we had kids that were given devices to use at home for online learning, and they
Yeah.
didn't have any internet access.
Yeah,
You
that's the
know?
problem. That was, I mean, there's a big equality issue around the world with that. So the poorer countries, obviously, even more so. It's really
Yes.
caused an issue.
Yeah. So
It's not.
that really highlighted some of the inequities that we have as well.
Yeah, I mean, some obviously like the university institutions, some of them actually say, yeah, this actually works. You know, doing some online.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
but even
Yeah.
then, you know, students still want to sort of socialize as well. You know.
Yeah. I mean, we all need that,
Yeah, yeah,
adults too. We just all need that human interaction that you can't fully have with a computer.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, in your book, you provide a many description of the challenges you of some of the students that you faced, that you taught faced. Sorry. So,
okay.
which of your students do you think faced the most difficult situation? How could you reform it? Could a reformed education system have helped him or her?
Um, I think, well, in my book, I have actually some specific student stories where I really talk about some of the students that I taught and give a little bit about their background and how, they kind of impacted me. I think what I try to highlight in some of those stories is just the importance of school for kids.
Yeah,
It's not just a place to go to learn. It really, for some kids, it's kind of it's sort of like the safe place for them. It's where they get things that they're not getting at home, or
all
where they
right,
can,
okay,
where they're allowed to be kids.
yeah, yeah,
Because some of the kids that I was teaching at the time, really lived more of an adult. They had adult responsibilities at home. I had one little girl who, at the age of 5, she was responsible for feeding and bathing her younger siblings.
right,
Um, she was being left alone. So, school is often the place that really they get to go, kids get to go and they just get to be kids, and they know that they're taken care of there. They get their meal, they have, the warmth, and they're getting things that don't get at home. So, that's really kind of, I think I tried to share some of that in my book about just, some of those unique needs of some of the kids.
all right, I see. Yeah. Well, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive in your book. I'll just take a little look in the page. Uh, I mean, I'm just looking at some of the chapters now. Welcome to the world of education.
Yeah, I mean, if you would like, I could just sort of give a brief overview to your
Yeah,
listeners
yeah,
of it.
yeah. I'm just looking at
Yeah,
the contents and then maybe run through
sure.
the contents. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
in
the book,
steps.
the book is really split into 2 parts.
Right.
The first part is where I'm explaining why I feel like public education is failing and that we need to make improvements.
Yeah.
And I go deep into some issues on Common Core standards, technology, grading policies, English language learner programs, and
Yeah.
then behaviors and discipline is really a big issue.
Yeah.
And the second half of the book is it's how to go about advocating for improvement and change. And I do give the reader, I share my personal story of how I advocated for the teacher microphones, and I break that down into 10 steps so that the reader can kind of read that story and look at those steps and use that as a guide for how they want to advocate for change in their
Yeah.
district or beyond.
Okay, I see. Well, it begins with it saying admit there's a problem, which obviously you've obviously highlighted that problem just now in the show, and then identify the root cause of the problem. That's always sometimes either it depends on the organization, but where there's various different problems, either they sweep it under the carpet or they don't deal with it properly when it comes to looking at the root cause.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I hear a lot of times people will say, well, we just need to give education more money.
Yeah.
And, you know, money may be it may be needed and it may be very useful in implementing a solution, but you first need to really understand what is the problem and what's causing it. Because if you don't do those beginning steps, you know, you might not be spending the money in the best way that it should be spent. So you do really need to understand the problem.
All right, I see. Yeah. Well, here's something that I liked. My favorite topic is being resilient. Where does that fit in with all this in the book? Step 9 is.
I think, you know, if you are going to, anyone that's trying to advocate for change, whether it's in education or really anything else in life, you're going to run it up against a lot of walls that are, you know, in your way of progress. And you have to be resilient and understand that, okay, you know, I hit this brick wall. I'm not able to maybe make the change that I want going in this direction. How can I adjust my plan? You know, and you really do, because I think, you know, you're going to hear the word no a lot more than you hear yes when you're trying to advocate for something. So you have to be resilient. You can't just accept no. You have to figure out another way, and you have to figure out another person to speak with and another pathway to go around.
Yeah. Well, that's something maybe all around, even for the teachers and the students can benefit from that, I suppose, can't they? Really.
Oh yeah. And you know, and a lot of this, some of the students that I talk about in my book and some of their stories that, you know, I was sharing with you, like this one little girl who had so much adult responsibilities as a young child at home. You know, a lot of those kids have amazing resilience. You know, they really face hardship in their personal life, and they are just so resilient.
Yeah. So at the end of the book, you have your 10 steps to improve public education. Do you want to say that in a nutshell, or wait for people to buy the book? Do you want to mention them in a nutshell?
Say what?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's right. 10 steps to improve public education, because obviously that's basically what the topic's about in the show, isn't it? So
yes.
So do you want to say what those 10 steps are, or to improve?
You know what? I'd rather people buy the book.
Oh, the book. Okay.
Because,
I would do that.
Well, here's the reason why, Dave. It's not just you know, I want people to buy the book. If the 10 steps are not just presented as steps, they're just taking my journey, how I advocated for change and was successful at it, and then breaking that down into 10 steps. And the steps by themselves don't really mean as much as when you read the context of the story behind it.
Yeah, I see.
What I will tell your listeners, though, is, you know, the steps are really meant to help create a conversation that you can have to get your change in effect. And there's a lot of work that has to be done in like the first 4 steps before you even really start having that conversation with anybody about your idea. You know, there's a lot of preliminary work that needs to be done, like you alluded to, with really understanding the problem and trying to find the best solution.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, last question, just before we round up and get everyone to point to your website and everything else you're doing. Imagine you could dismantle the current education system and build an entirely new one. What would it look like?
I would give more influence and autonomy to the people at the bottom layers. Right. You know, I think of our education system as a pyramid. That base foundational level is made up of parents and teachers.
Yeah.
And I would give more autonomy to that layer, because those are the people that really understand the needs of the kids the best. And they honestly are the people that care the most about the kids, because you know, parents and teachers.
Parents and teachers. Yeah, I suppose you're right there. They're always going to be there. Well, the parents will be there for as long as the kids are at school, so 15, 16,
exactly.
You know, like whatever years. But the teachers, well, they could move on, but they're there for a long time as well. You know, compared to the students. So they will know best, I think, won't they? Really, on the grounds.
Exactly. Well, you know, you're a parent yourself, and
that's right. Yeah.
No one cares more about your child than you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Suzanne, it's been really nice talking to you in this show, and obviously a very important topic. Not only with what's gone on recently, we've covered the pandemic, but I think globally, education, health, those are very, very big, important things to look at. So I know with health is wealth, but education is very important for people's futures and where they're going to go, really. So.
Right.
Excellent. Well, yeah, thanks a lot for coming to the show. So how do people find you and the work you're doing? And
yeah, the easiest way is to go to my website, which is SuzanneDeMallie.com.
Yep.
And if they go there, they can get in touch with me. They can buy the book if they want. They
Yep.
can access my social media. So that's the easiest way.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you're doing a good job out there, Suzanne. And once again, thanks a lot for coming to share this with my audience today.
Thank you, Dave.